Where it is, we always trigger and start the defense rotation or attention on a midfield dive. And the reason why we do that is we want to scramble the defense as quick as possible. Get them thinking, get them ball side of their guy, get them I'm hot, really show. And we can draw a little bit more attention coming from the midfield with speed and space at a short stick or a long stick. But that's going to draw the attention for the defense to start pushing upfield a little bit. And then once the ball moves, we've scrambled the defense. And our guys hear it all the time. We will not attack a set defense. We will only attack a scramble defense. So we initiate from the midfield because we scramble a lot quicker, if that makes sense. So our on-dodge unit, or on-ball unit is typically to trigger it, to start it, is the midfield. But we're always going to whatever, if the midfield starts, if we're going to dodge, there's going to be a dodger. There's three of them, 3 rules. There's a dodge, there's a follow, and there's a float. Every time, I don't care what the attack's doing, but every time a midfielder goes to the goal, if he goes down the alley, one of those midfielders has to follow him, get in his back pocket, so if he rolls back, he has an option, or if he's doubled. And then there always has to be a midfielder floating away. And you'll see this on the video. So we can already simply dodge, follow, float. We're going to have good motion. We're attacking the goal. We have support, and we have balance. All right. So that's what we have with the on-ball unit. And then if the midfield has the ball, the attack unit is off ball. So they're really simple. We can get them to clear, follow, float. They're very basically mirroring the midfield, and it's that same principle. We clear space, our follow is supporting, and our float is going to balance. So again, you can do it at 2 ends of the field and bring them together. And if we have the dodging group, dodge, follow, float, clearing group, clear, off-ball group, clear, follow, float, you're going to have really good motion offense. Yes?
When you're talking about your trigger, are you calling that? Like, hey, Johnny 400?
Yep,
or
absolutely. Okay. We'll be kind of spinning the ball. We'll say, well, we'll trigger it on John, trigger it on John. And that's usually a midi. And when he gets it, we're into it.
Right, that's a long dodge, right? So he's going to pull himself out.
Pretty much. Well, we never pull ourselves out. It will be a long dodge, but we always, every single time we are attacking the goal, we have a simple process that we have to go through. And ours is, we call it kind of the pro step. So before we catch it, like a baseball outfielder, they always back up and then they pro step and get set, so then they can move to the ball to catch it, if that makes sense. We have our midfielders or any Dodgers pro step. So if they know we're adjacent, they're getting, the other thing that helps it, the reason why I talked about the strong side, weak side is, whenever the ball goes across the top or through X, that first touch has the green light to go. So everybody else can read that, so it helps with the timing. So if I'm a midfielder and my line mate is getting the ball north-south, I know he's not going, but when it comes across the top, the goal's in the back of the room, I know I'm going. So our guys have to pro step and be wide enough. So the first rule is through the ball. We will never let them catch it set, and certainly, they get barked at a lot if they ever catch it and take one step out, because that sets the defense. I told you, we only attack a scramble defense. Once you take negative steps, the defense is set. And a set defense has an advantage over an offense. So we will catch pro step, through the ball, into our man, to a pipe. Every single time, whether you're an attacking or a midfielder. It's got to be through the ball, into a man, and pipe. And I guarantee, if I went out and watched a lot of your practice, and I'm sure you have good players, I see it all year long, and I even see it with our guys. We have to argue. They think to be a good dodger is to get to that open space. And if you're dodging to space, you're not a good dodger. Because any defenseman can take an angle and beat you to that space. So when you think you're a threat to shoot it or beat it, that's when they're beating you. So to me, to be a good dodger is if you can get them to meet you at 18 yards and slip them, then you beat them at 11 yards. But if you're just running to the 11-yard mark, the defender's going to meet you there, if that makes sense. So that's why it's very important that we go through the ball into a man. We attack man first, never space. And it's tough for midfielders because a lot of the younger guys want to catch the ball, back it out, do that, like Coach said, that big cradle, just rolling their stick around and all that. And then they're saying, well, he cleared that space, so I'm going to run right into that space. And that guy's going to run to that space too, and they're going to meet at the wrong spot to be an effective offensive player. So that's something that's really important with our team offense is how you dodge. And hopefully that answer, that was, again, a long-winded answer. Hopefully it took care of that. So we have the on-ball unit, off-ball unit, and then the biggest thing, once we trigger dodge from the midfield and we feel like we've at least brought attention, hopefully scrambled the defense by either a half slide or a full slide, then we're playing in twos. That's the biggest key. You can't leave if one guy's attacking the goal and he pushes it once and that first pass guy wants to play, you're still in the teeth of the defense. That's kind of where the recovery's going. You've already drawn them to that side. So if we can get our guys, first touch is a swing and second touch is another dodge, you're going to be a lot better because you're moving the ball away from where the defense had to help and then recover. So we really stress who our guys catching it to. So if I'm dodging down the alley and I throw it forward to an attackman, that attackman knows when it hits his stick, he's getting through X. Now we're going to attack away from the attention that I drew, if that makes sense. Same thing if I drive down the alley and I'm covered with a stretch of that attackman and I decide to either pull pass or roll back and throw it up to the follow, that follow guy's a swing guy. He's not going to go right into a dodge because he's coming right into the attention we drew with the defense. He pushes it across the top. That's the second pass that guy would go. So that's how you can be pretty effective with beating a scrambled defense. All right, midfield play, dodge, follow, float. This is some video. Might have to stop it a little bit. Okay, so real quick, just before he presses play, you're going to see these are our three midfielders. Something we do, you don't have to do it. We have just recently added it. Is we always, when we go to that trigger dodge, we will always pass and post across the top. Because now at our level, if you don't have options anywhere on the field, whether you're a defenseman, whether you're an attacker, a midfielder, if you don't have options, they all can take one thing away. So if the midfielder gets the ball, I'm pretty sure this midfielder has it and is going to throw it across the top. If he stays high, we're not giving that dodger to trigger the top side dodge. We run right into it. So every time we do it, we pass, we call it post, or get under the dodge. So we'll come in. Now the trigger dodge can go top side or alley. It gives them options. So if this guy is throwing it across, he's going to come in. And then from that point, they're going to follow and float. And you'll see it. One guy will follow, and they communicate. You know, it doesn't have to be the same guy following every time. We want to confuse the defense. So once they're in, and the dodge happens, somebody's got to follow to be the support and the swing guy, and somebody has to float for the balance and that second dodge in two passes. And getting a little bit ahead of it for you guys is kind of get guys to understand and stop it for a second. Ideally, and this is good, if you can follow with the pole, you're always going to be attacking short sticks. So that just kind of gets you ahead because you're going to swing the ball against the pole. That makes sense? So if two guys, if you're passing posting, we're going to trigger against the short because that's going to scramble the defense the fastest. And then you have two guys in here. One's going to have a pole, one of them's going to have a short stick. Let's follow him with the pole, float with the short stick, so if he pushes it twice, scramble defense going against the short stick, I think advantage offense. Okay, so here you go. So we pass across top, we post, he goes alley, we follow it, we float, now we can push it two, and attack. Same thing, alley the other way. Pulls back, we swing it, and then he can attack the short stick away from the attention we drew on that side. Okay? I think it's just reflected. So alley, there's a follow. That's a pole, that's good. It's pulling a pole out of that help position. A trigger dodge, a follow, and a float. Okay, this is the same idea, but this is what the post does. If we pass and post, or get under the trigger dodger, we allow him to to go either alley or top side. And since this dodge is only drawing attention, we found if we can get top side and get between those hashes, they're always jumping to your face. We draw a slide every time. So we really like to not always just run down the alley. You see a lot of teams that, oh, that alley, it's not crowded, it's easy, run down the alley. Really encourage your guys to split and try to get across the top every now and then. So I'm telling you, those deep defensemen get so anxious they just jump to the ball. And now if you push it twice, all those defensemen are up pretty high, we can attack the corners. So this is going top side, but the same thing happens. A pass post, top side, a follow, and a float. So we throw it back, we swing it, and we attack against the other short stick. Top side, we follow it, we float, push it twice, and we can dodge. Okay, so that's the midfield motion there. When they have the ball, on balls, dodge, follow, float. Attack, we'll say that the midfielders we create, we trigger the midfielders, say close to 100% of the time, really. So the attack will be off ball. So they need to, their number one rule is to clear space for that midfielder to go into. Certainly don't want to crowd a dodge. So we will clear, and then we will follow, and then we'll float. Those are the same principle where the clear guy is clearing the space, the follow is going to be an outlet for the dodger and a swing guy, and the float is going to be that secondary dodger. So in two passes, it gets to the float guy, he can go, but it's on that weak side. It's going to typically be in a position where it's a 2-on-2. So if we go here, one more, hold on one second. Bring it back. I've already mentioned, I think options are key for a couple reasons. It puts pressure on the defense, but I think it's good for your players too, because it makes them think a little bit. So you don't tell them what to do. You say, okay, we're going to keep, you've got two options. So like those midfielders right there, you have the option to go down the alley, you have the option to go top side. You make the decision, live with it, do it right, and then they feel like they have some freedom to be a lacrosse player rather than be a robot. So the same thing that happens here, if we're off ball with our attack, we want a couple different options for them to clear. We don't want to, and we'll scout teams, and they will every single time that guy that's clearing is just going to go to the crease and clear up. We love that defensively because we can cheat the heck out of that thing. So we want our guys with a couple different options. Now, for here, the way we started it in the fall, we have our traditional, clear inside, which we call a hook. We're hooking underneath our guy to make him make a decision. Most of you guys have heard that, where he's going to play the clear because you're behind him. He's going to turn and face you. He can't slide, or he's going to choose to really help on that dodger. Now there's a free guy behind him, and that's the clear guy. So we will hook underneath the defender, and then there's another action that we call a fade. Now, like I said, these are our general principles. Coach, what would you say, 11? We have 11 clear opportunities to put it in perspective. Our attack can have 11 options when that trigger dodge happens. So that's getting a little bit higher. But it starts with a hook or a fade. And if you can get your guys to hook and fade, we'll be in pretty good shape. So right here, we're going to hook, clear that alley, push it forward. That was the follow, and that was the float. 91 driving out was the float. We'll show it twice. A hook inside. A follow, show it one more time. So we're going to hook with the closest, and a follow, so he's going to swing it, and then we're going to float out and attack that backside. Stop it 1 second. Stop it real quick. Okay, so right here, just to go back to what I was saying, you can see our 1, 2, 3. All right, because this midfielder is the one that dodged. Now we have two other midfielders, right? Because we have a fourth attacker here. One's going to follow that dodge. So if you can picture a midfielder right here, the first thing I told you was 4 on the strong side. Right, so that's north-south play. 1, 2, 3. The followed midfielder would be on this side of the goal. The float midfielder would be out here. And now you've got that thing you really desire is offense 2-on-2. So if this guy gets upfield, this midfielder doesn't slide. He's got space. He can make the play and finish it. If he gets upfield and they come to the face, you've got a step-in shot. So that's that 4-2 that kind of comes out of this simple motion of dodge, follow, float, clear, follow, float. Okay? What was you ever saying?
When that guy goes, you tell me, is there a spot that trying to get into a backside Mike Ridgely?
Well, the way we like to do it, we want him to get to the backside, but we want him to get underneath, so it's usually pretty shallow, but you have to play your defenseman, you know, but we want him to get underneath and then get up to 12. See, he's a little short. We want our guys to be at 12 inside. And then there's space to get down a pipe if the slide does happen. If you sit and go for the crease, even if you catch it, it favors the goalie, and there's nowhere to move your feet to, if that makes sense. So when he hooks in, we want him to hook, go high, and then start working down deep. So he can move his feet into space, and he can see some net when he catches it. You catch it toes on the crease, you just see the goalie's fog right in your face. And what were you mentioning? Yeah, another thing that's pretty important for us on the offense, and I think we can show this one more time. Stop it once he pushes it. Stop it right here. When we clear, follow, float, we end up with 2 behind. We call this the sink. We want the sink to be just outside the hash, 5 yards behind goal line. Because this guy, as he catches it, he can take a step in to read it. Now, if there's a huge hole, he can go in and pull another defenseman. He's deep enough where he can still push it through X and create more space. But these guys can function. He can swing it. They're not getting that early contact from the defense. So our sink is something we've got to work with our guys. Trust me, they don't just naturally get to this spot. It's like training monkeys sometimes. We get these guys that actually get to these 2 spots. You'd be amazed. We're lucky because we practice on a field with football lines, so that helps us a ton with our strong sides inside and these reference points. I would, if you decide to use some of this stuff and you want your guys to clear, follow, float, and get that 2-man behind, I strongly encourage it. You see some guys, I got next attack. He's awesome. So he catches here and rocks back and forth against the set defense, and then when he finally leaves X and bursts, he's going that way because I know he can't go that way. And going that way to me favors the defense. Going that way to me favors the offense. So we want the ball to quickly get through X so we can positively attack the pipe and not rock and have the 1-man show and the defense is sitting on their pipe saying, wait till he beats this guy. And it's the defense's set. So we pass through X rather than carry through X. Plays faster, it's our strong side and east side. So that sink is important for our guys to get to. See, the float goes to the sink, we swing it with the follow, and then we have some play. All right? Oh, okay, so stop it real quick. So now, this is our fade. So we're going to ball side fade. And this is 2 things. It's to change the picture for the defense. If they're used to that clear and you see them starting to jump off of that, a lot of defensemen, once you clear, you're not really a threat for maybe 6 or 7 yards, so they'll just jump the ball carrier off of that clear. If you sense that, now you can fade, and it locks that defenseman here to make a decision rather than you going in. We never want our back always chest to the ball, but it's tough to clear sometimes and get high and still be dangerous. So they'll leave that guy. So if we sense that, we'll just have the ball side guy fade, right? And then the fade which clears the space will float, and this guy will clear in. So we can have that 4-2 strong side inside. Another thing that's really good with the fade, as you're teaching this, your attackmen are a little bit slower thought process. And the last thing you want, if this guy's already into his dodge and he's right here, you don't want to hook it because he's going to run right into the dodger. So you can tell your attacker, look, if you're a little confused and you're late, stay on the perimeter and just fade. Don't go in there and make a mess of it. So that's why we did this option as well. So you can see, dodge, now the same principle, we've got our inside guy. He did a good job getting in 12 so he could drift downfield as an inside threat. And we drove upfield, same thing. We're going to fade, we're going to float. The float gets it, goes upfield. And we get to the sink. We fade to the sink, we float to the sink. So we can handle the ball without pressure and move upfield and make a decision before a defenseman shuts us down.
So you can see in the drill they're practicing one or the other, but in a game situation, everybody moves off of that guy on that wing. In other words, he sets it. If he fades, everybody does what they do. If he hooks, everybody does what they do.
Got it. They read. We like to think that we can go in. We watch a ton of video, so we may pick out all those clear options for our attack. We may go into a game with 3. We don't want them trying to pick and choose 8. So we'll go in with 3 because we'll know their tendencies. But the first that we're hoping that they kind of communicate from X, because the other guy back here, and we're going to hook this time, we're going to hook. As the ball's going up, we know we're not dodging, it starts going across the top, they're going to hook, they know that, they're quick, they're in it. But if they're not communicating, they have to read the ball side attack. So we know if this guy fades here, is he not who's dodging here? No, we already went through it. If this attacking fades, then we know we've got to clear or hook the backside guy so we can fade to this corner. So this is the guy you have to read on that dodge. They got to read this guy. So if he fades, we close and that clears. Right? Any other questions? Okay, so let's go next. We've got now kind of putting it all together. Now we'll put the attackman in with the midfielder so you can kind of get a sense of how much motion there is and activity. So again, the keys to it are working together in your 3-man units. The midfield can do whatever they want. The attack can do whatever they want because it works together. You got to clear space, you got to attack the goal, you need to support, balance. Those balance guys end up being secondary dodgers on 2 passes, and then you've got to play in 2 passes and 2 dives. You can't play in ones. I get involved with some club teams and help out some younger guys. Everybody wants to play in ones. One guy will go, we'll throw it to the next guy, that guy wants to be a dodger. And if you're playing lacrosse in ones, you're not going to win games. If you play in 2s, sometimes 3s, you're going to win games. So here we go. So this is all together, and it should make sense of all those words I just threw out there. So we're just spinning it right here. We know that this guy can't dodge because the ball's moving north-south. We know this guy can because it's east-west. We decide to hook. We go in, we follow the float, they push it back. There's the secondary dodger. That stop it real quick. You can. So before these guys started drifting, as that it was a clear cut. Yeah, there you go. That's what we're talking about right there. That's that 4-2. And then, as they move it through X, now look what we've got. 4-2. That's a good situation to be in right there. Yeah, there's no defense. So same thing. Again, but top side, which doesn't matter. That ends up almost being like a fade to the dodger. But they hook the initial dodge side, and now they're playing that 2-on-2 on that backside.
On those midfielders, you gotta make sure we talked about this yesterday with our guys. Make sure that every time you guys get a guy into the crease, he's not just going to the crease. You know, he's an option as he's cutting through. He's trying to read the guys in front of him, or the guy who slipped to him into space. So whether he's cutting down height as an attacking, or if he's fading into the midfield, he's going to put his head down and worry about getting in, and he's still part of the offense. And sometimes we get our guys so worried about the motion, they're not too worried about the ball. So you want to teach your guys to make sure they're always looking for the ball, they're always a threat, they're always trying to find that little space and trying to help out the guy with the ball.
Yeah, I've always felt like that when you're playing motion offense, somebody's always clearing space. You know, a lot of times teams are playing with 5 offensive players. Because clear guys think, oh, I've got to get through. Watch it. You know, these attacking guys coming out and they just turn and get through. They're not a threat at all. So if you're a clear guy just thinking I need to clear space and he's not thinking I need to be a threat, you're playing man down. So that's what the coach is saying. Have to go in there with a purpose, chest to the ball. Even if I'm clear the back is coming this way, I want to keep my chest to the ball, kind of shuffle through. So if my guy jumps early, I can catch it, finish it, and then creep up field. But we use different terms, but chest to the ball first here. that would sense. And then a fade. We'll watch 2 more fades, but you can see how those simple principles, there's a lot of action here at that point of trigger. And we know right here it's going east-west, we're going to trigger it. Boom, and you can see now we've got the midfielders going nerve dodge, follow float. We've got the attack, fading, follow float. Now we've got a 2-on-2, we push it through, slide across. Now we're 2-on-2 on this weak side. The guy went in with a purpose there. That midfielder was square with the stick up the whole time. You're playing with 6 guys.
Notice that when we push the attack and that crease attack, usually when he gets cut and fades that back pipe and holds there until he sees he either throws it back or he can kind of hold there for a midfield dodge. So watch our crease side, we'll just hold. That's an option right there. He needs to be able to see that.
We call that the pinch spot. He just goes and pinches for a second, and then if he rolls back, he can step off. But if this guy goes, he can step forward. So he'd have him basically straddle the goal line. Then he has 2 options. There's the top side, you can go down off the back side. Okay. Any real quick questions before we
How long does it take? You said you brought 6 All-Americans in. How long does it take before they pick that offense up?
Depends on minutes, really. I think they pick it up quickly. I really do. Everywhere I've been, we once I came up with this strong side, weak side, that's what I've always preached. And you'd be surprised, especially if you can break them into units. You know, if you have 2 coaches and one says, I'm really comfortable with the midfielders, I have that. I'm comfortable with the attackmen. And a lot of, we've got 9 attachments. Some of you guys may have 4 or 5, and you have one guy working with those 4 or 5. They're going to get it, you know. And the other thing is, be careful how much you throw at them. But if you say, okay, here we're going to hook and we're going to fade, and that's it, and you teach your attackmen to do that, you'll be surprised at how quick they learn it. It really is. And then the concept, I mean, that's a lot of words when you look at it, but when you simply, these guys are smart, and they know it. The guys that really care are going to figure it out. But if you're in the midfield and you're triggering, and all you have to do is dodge, and somebody has to follow it, somebody has to float, and you rep that, it's pretty quick. You'd be surprised.
You've got everything showing down the alley. How's it change without the sweep over the top?
Nothing changes. And you saw that in some of the video. The only thing that changes is you can technically say, we're always clearing with the ball side attackman. So if we say he's going to fade, right, on that trick, but that midfielder decides to go forward, it kind of resembles more of a hook, because when he comes across the top, that guy's actually going through. But it doesn't change anything. That's the good thing about it, where the attack could be in a fade or a hook. If he goes top side or out, but they're still getting to the sink, and there's going to be somebody inside every time, no matter where they go.
I think a lot of the stuff that we do, personnel-wise, is that when we go into doing groups like Coach says, he's comfortable in the midfield, I'm comfortable in the attack, or vice versa, we'll do shooting drills in the motion offense. So they don't really know what they're doing. So for a full week or 2 weeks, we'll really pound it into them. Then we're going to fade. And then we're going to no fade if it's an attack. And we're going to pass post. So they'll pass post. They'll be like, all right, this time we're going to throw back. This time we're going to rotate back through. And you're going to be the shooter. So you just get them rotating and doing this stuff over and over and over and over again, whether you're doing it as a set offense skeleton, or you're going to do it in a shooting drill, or doing it in 3-on-3s, or 2-on-2s, or 4-on-4s, so you have 3 attackmen and 1 midfielder. You just have them kind of set this stuff up in small doses so that they can grasp it one item at a time. And then also what we'll do is we'll set up the small movements first. So we'll set up the midfielder working on just the type of dodge that triggers. And then we'll work on the midfielder doing just the type of dodge that floats. And then the attackman will work on transferring the ball. And then the attackman will work on attacking from those angles in the sink. You know, those kind of things, you put the small pieces together and build on top of them as practice goes on, like we were kind of doing in practice, was half field, full field, half field, full field. You do small piece, full field, bigger piece, full field, full piece. Then they can kind of do that as it gets on and just stick with the same thing for a week, you know, or 2 weeks, or whatever, how long until they grasp it. Then add the new one in and just sprinkle the one back and forth. So that's kind of how we break it down for practice and just developing the guys.
That is a great point. We just had this conversation a couple days ago. first thing I talked about was when, what's important now, and we were going through this a little bit too quick, because they were on break for over a month, and they came back, and we just expected them to run it. So we said we need to get them, and they do shooting drills with batch volley float. You know, do attack drills with a clear into the sink, pushing through X. They didn't know. They were just doing pre-practice shooting, loving it, saying, I'm shooting it, but they were getting to those spots. So we kind of teamed in, got them more reps, because that was important now. Because if we just kept flying through everything, we would be pretty bad in that first game. So there was, yeah.
And you might have said this already, but the follow and float midfielders, are they reading or are they verbally communicating? I got follow, I got float.
Yeah, they're verbally communicating. Everybody talks about how defense has to talk. I think the offense should talk more. You know, and then when I'm working with defense, I said the defense should talk more. But both of them should be talking a lot. So we want to communicate. It helps us a little bit because we typically, depending on the opponent, if we know we're playing a really good bowl, and there's a lot of really good bowls out there, it's pretty easy because whoever has the bowl is going to follow every time.
Yeah.
So we can get that pull the heck out of there, swing the ball against them, and then attack a short stick away from that pole having to go play the ball. So that helps it. So if you wanted to make it easy and have them learn it pretty quick, to say, okay, fellas, if you have a long stick, you're going to follow every time. And the off-ball short stick is going to float every time. And then they get it. Now the communication better be there if they go to trip over each other, if there's 3 short sticks out there for defense. So you have to have them talk through it.
But still, yeah, especially the younger.
Yes. And there may not be as many poles on the field. It might be more, you know, midfielders playing offense and defense. So communication should be key. And use those terms. There has to be a term for everything you do. As a coach, it's up to you because you get frustrated with guys and you have your own lingo and you're saying, why did you hook? But you didn't explain to them. That is the term we use for a hook clear. So we have, if we gave you our list of terms, you'd be shocked because it's pages and pages. We have a term for everything because it's easy for us to say trigger. Why do you trigger there? But if they don't know what a trigger dodge is, we didn't label that to trigger the offense. We're saying you should trigger there. They're like, what the heck's trigger? And you're mad at him because he didn't do it right. You know, so I think terms are key and how to communicate. Yep.
I was wondering, do you guys have in the hook fade with your motion, your follow guy kind of being the safety anchor, or do you guys ever practice something like if you follow, okay, I'm going to be the guy to stop the fast break if there is a turnover or something does happen? Do you guys have?
Well, that's a really good point because our float in the midfield is always the guy in.
Okay, so
that's the balance guy.
Okay.
So, and even if we roll back and we push it twice to that float, when he dodges, we have to follow and float again. So the float always is getting in and protecting.
Okay.
And the float on attack is always going to back up the goal. So that's that balance portion of it. That's a good point. What else? Anything else? What was defense? All right.
Talking about team defense now, obviously they've got, I think, when you look at everything that our offense can do, they have about 35 different options to go through. So we have to make sure that we're staying organized and our whole defense is communicating with each other. As Coach just mentioned, everybody talks about it. I don't know how well everybody does it, but communication is the primary focus. It's the key to having a good defense. 2 years ago, coached the 5th ranked defense in Division III, and it was by far the best communicating defense I've ever been a part of as a player. My short time coaching now, and those guys, they were buddies off the field. They spent a lot of time around each other. They knew where everybody was going to be, and they communicated. So they were talking to each other. They were having a conversation on the field. If you're out there and you're saying your terms and you're focused on your guy, and you're kind of acting like a robot, then everything is going to be a little bit faster. It's going to happen faster during the game, and we want you to be slowed down a little bit. And so we want to be able to just kind of have a conversation with each other. If I'm in, I need to be making sure that I'm telling Johnny what he's doing, and Johnny's telling me when I'm okay to release it, and all that stuff. So make sure that everybody's talking to each other. And then away from the ball, obviously defending the ball is huge. We got to make sure that we're doing a good job with our on-ball principles. But then behind the ball, like Coach just said, if you saw our term sheet, this goes for defense as well. We have a lot of terms, and they're required to know that stuff. So if you define those jobs, you have terms for them. It makes everything easier on the defensive side of the ball. And then this is another key to team defense is make sure that you flood the paint. We have a big graphic of the paint is kind of 10 yards in front of the goal and 5 yards wide on each side. And it's just like the lane and the paint in basketball. We got to make sure that when we're playing defense, we've got all our guys in tight, so we're ready to play inside and then look out. Here, I put up our off-ball terms. So obviously, number one is on-ball. So you got the ball, and then we have push. So that's the guy. If that ball is rotating, that's that next pass. So if you're getting ready to go out on that next pass, you're that push guy. You got to make sure you're letting all your teammates know that that's your responsibility. Sag is dropping back to that crease, that paint area. So if you were just on ball and move forward, then I'm recovering back into the crease to the paint. I'm helping with that off-ball defense now. Hot, obviously, we keep it simple. We don't need to come up with anything crazy. I don't need to revolutionize terms when it comes to that. So hot, you're ready to fire. You're ready to help whoever is on the ball. 2, making sure that hot guy is covered up. So obviously, having 2 responsibilities here is huge. So you've got that hot guy, and wherever your man is, so you got to make sure that you're opened up. You know where your guy is. You got to know where the ball is, and you got to know where that hot guy. And the same thing goes with cover on the backside. We want to make sure that we're shading the most dangerous guy. And a lot of the time, this will be kind of a decision between a long stick and a short stick up top. If we can, we want to make sure that we can have a long stick on that backside cover guy so that he can cover as much ground as possible. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but everybody has 2 jobs. So when you're away from the ball, you have 2 responsibilities, and that's knowing where your guy is, and that's knowing what your other responsibility is. So when we talk about positioning, got to make sure, and this is something that our guys struggled with through the fall, was their off-ball positioning and making sure their head was on a swivel. So a lot of the time, and I know growing up playing lacrosse, guys get fixated on the ball. And we're working on breaking that habit. We're working on making sure that we have guys checking their back and seeing where the ball is. And we also have to be in a good off-ball position with our bodies. We got to make sure our feet are getting us there. When we're opened up, I can see the ball right here, and I can see my man. And I know what my responsibility is at the same time. And so we got to get that good feet position, ball, me, man, all the time. And that's huge. And at the same time, we talk about ball watching a lot of the time. We also have guys who will get very fixated on their man. A lot of time, you have an offensive midfielder, a face-off guy, somebody who's not used to playing defense, and he's stuck on defense, and he says, well, I've got this guy, good luck, fellas, I'm playing him. So we've got to make sure that we get our guys breaking that habit. We've got to put them in situations through drills and practice where everybody's comfortable playing defense, and that's kind of, you got to create a little chaos there. Face-off guys, like I mentioned, offensive midfielders are not always the most comfortable, so you have to get them comfortable. And everybody has to flood the paint. Don't be in the far third, and the next graphic, Coach Torkington will understand.
Real quick with what Coach just said, it's something that we really believe in, and sometimes as coaches you can get lost of it because you always hear the ball's the most important thing. I agree 100% with that, but a lot of times when you're evaluating defense, you're really watching what's happening on the ball and around it. And to be a successful team defense, it's the bar 3, not the ball 3. And sometimes you don't get as wrapped up with that. So you have to make sure that you're putting your guys in as challenging situations to make sure that 2 in that cover for sure, they've got the toughest job. If you're playing ball, you don't have to be the smartest guys. You're playing the ball, right? And if you're adjacent, and if you're hot, you're the one guy on the crease, and you know you have to slide. That's pretty easy to figure out. But that covering 2 is where it gets really tricky. So that's where we spend most of our time. And again, we talk about how we have our defense play down the majority of practice. That teaches that covering two to make decisions and figure out who's dangerous and how to get there. So that's just kind of expanding on what Coach was mentioning there.
So we talk about our rule of thirds. We split the field, obviously high third, middle third here, and then low third, outside, middle, and outside. And then you can see that that middle portion right there is the paint. And well, we want to make sure, like I mentioned with that last slide, if the ball is up here and it's high outside third, we can't have anybody out here or down here. We've got to make sure that we're in those adjacent thirds and we're in the paint so that, like Coach Hanna with the motion offense, and a lot of teams are taking that concept. They're trying to create that strong side, get four guys on one side and then attack two. We have to really fight as a defense. If they create this strong side and we've got four guys over here, we've got to fight and get there quick. We have to recover fast to make sure that we take away all that space that they have to work with. So you see, we have to work on our angles of approach, make sure that we're channeling, keeping a guy. If a dodge is starting in this half of the field, we don't want it to end over here. If it ends over here, then that's going to scramble the defense. That's going to make everything a lot more difficult. And so we got to make sure we take a good angle approach, we channel, we're talking, and we have that paint is flooded.
Yeah, that's a great diagram. And you'd be surprised. Our veteran defensemen, the guys who have been playing for a long time, look at that and like, wow. Now it makes sense. That's that visual. Like I mentioned earlier, video things, tape them so they can see it. And a lot of guys here, they don't respond to that. You give this to your defenseman, and they really understand if the ball's behind in this low third, if any players are in the high third, you're completely wrong. You're so far out of whack. If we're getting a wing dodge and any players are in that far third, you're not in a position to make a play. So this simplifies it. Once we get our guys understanding, yes, we're talking thirds, flood the balls third and the next third and vacate the far third, you're going to be much better as a team defense.
And again, Coach mentioned with shooting technique and tactics and all that, using those hashes as a reference point. If you guys are lucky enough to have football fields, basically 12 yards above the goal, and then those hashes on a football field is a little different for a high school field. You can get in tighter than that, but making sure that you're inside of those kind of reference points on the field.
Yep. Here's some video. We can get you through. Obviously, decent white here, and you'll see everything we're coming from is from inside, because this is just our simple, most base defense where it's a crease slide. Go ahead and look at this. And you'll see the recoveries. And pause it for 1 second, just to add a little bit. Where the breakdown is, obviously, if you're covering your two, aren't good lacrosse players and can't stay ahead of the play, you're going to struggle a little bit. But what we found is if you're two, the two's responsibility obviously is to cover, when there's a fire, to cover up that hot guy's man. Because he's dangerous, he's in the crease area, to cover him up. Just as important, maybe even more important, is he has got to give direction to the recovering player, whether it's a midfielder, because if that guy turns and recovers, but he doesn't know where he's going, and then he has to look and find the open man and get to your way behind him. So we make sure that our two is in there, gets a stick on whoever the hot guy was playing, on the fire situation, and then as soon as the guy that was beat is coming in, he's pointing, and he's saying, right here, we like for him to get in and bump through the crease so he doesn't have to literally run 18 yards to go find another guy. But he gets to the paint, and then the two guy has to tell him where to go. We don't even, you can do drills where your recovery guy doesn't even look. He's just looking at the two guy. If he doesn't give him direction, you're never going to get back to 6-on-6, and you're going to give up goals. But that you'll see that here where our two. There's a slide, the guy going in, the recovery gets in the paint and looks away. Another alley for firing, we're going in. Okay, that was pretty easy because he just played the follow. Underneath, we're going from inside. The guy recovers into the paint and then matches up. The other thing, real quick, that is very important and something we can, there's some kind of heat. We want the guy to stay on the slide and create a double. But base, when you're first teaching this, we've got to make sure that all our guys do this. When there's a fire, and I'm sure you guys see it, when there's a fire, that's the situation. Because everybody on the ball thinks they're doing great. You know, and then you hear a fire, and those guys are like, no, it's fine. Why are you firing at me? It doesn't matter. It's up to the hot guy. When he says fire, that's how the defense has to play. And we have our guys in our base set. First thing they have to understand is, once the guy on ball hears fire, he's off. Because the quicker you're recovering, get back to 6-on-6, the less scrambled you are. I talked about that with offense, and you're back to 6s. You want to be 6s on defense, I know that. You definitely don't want to be man down. So a slower recovery, that guy stays on the ball, offense is playing up a guy 6-on-5 for a longer period of time. It's putting pretty heavy stress on your defense. So on fire, that guy on ball has to get off right away. Get back in, match up P6s, and live another play. Okay, so here's the deal. I'll give you guys some options. So we're into options. So we're about 10 minutes over. It's 12:10. We have some authority here too that can give us direction. If you want it on the screen, because sometimes when you sit in front of a group this big, we maybe didn't even mention anything that you really came here to really learn or hear. We're more than willing to stay a few minutes and get on the board if you want, and just answer general questions. If you're really, really hungry, and that was enough for you, we can certainly end it here as well, whatever you guys want.
I think we're going to keep it moving, and